Hi, and welcome to another episode of Essop's E-Lessons. Today we'll be looking at the poem The First Day After the War. This poem was written by a South African poet, Mazisi Kunene, and we can see the way he structures this poem in that it reflects his African heritage. If you find this video helpful, please like it, hit subscribe, and remember to share it with your friends. Let's start off with looking at the title. The words first day after tell us that there's a new beginning. The word war refers to a difficult time for a country, and historically for South Africa, apartheid was the most difficult time for the people of this country. So what we should know before we analyze this poem is that the first day after the war represents the end of apartheid. The first line says, "We heard the songs of a wedding party." This is a metaphor. The celebration of the South African people are compared to a wedding, and it suggests that there are two parties that are being joined together here. In line 2, it says, "We saw a soft light." The soft light here represents a bright future, and the soft light coiled around the young blades of grass. So we see this is also a metaphor where the light is compared to a snake that coils. And although snakes do have connotations of danger, we see that here it's as though light is coiling in a very protective manner around these young blades of grass. So what do these young blades of grass represent? They represent the youth, and this metaphor suggests growth. The youth are compared to new grass because this shows that the youth can blossom free from the horrors of apartheid. Line 4 says, "At first we hesitated." So the word hesitated shows that they're unsure how to react. They're unsure what to do with their newfound freedom. Then we saw her footprints, her face emerged, then her eyes of freedom. So we see here in her footprints, her face and her eyes, we see that freedom is personified as a woman who is leading the way, and this suggests that she is nurturing and caring for the people of South Africa. In line 5, the word freedom is followed by an exclamation mark, and we see that this shows the excitement of the speaker. So from the first few lines of this poem, we see that there is a celebration. It seems to be about a wedding, but it is actually celebrating the end of apartheid. The war that they're referring to is the struggle that many people fought and died for in South Africa to ensure that all South Africans could enjoy equal rights. If we move on to line 6, "She woke us up with a smile." We see that the personification of freedom continues. It's her wedding day. People are celebrating in her honor, and she wakes the people with a smile and she talks. So when the speaker says she woke us up, this is a metaphor, because apartheid is being compared to a long sleep and a period of stagnation for South Africa, and now that apartheid is over, freedom is able to re-energize the people of South Africa. In line 7 and 8, we see dialogue, and this is an inherent part of the African oral tradition of storytelling. So here freedom speaks in line 7. She says, "What day is this that comes suddenly?" The word suddenly suggests that it's unexpected, even though it is a very joyous occasion. Line 8, "We said it is the first day after the war." The "we" here represents the South African people who reply. They are acknowledging that their fight for freedom is over. Line 9 goes on to say, "Then without waiting." So we see here a contrast between the word hesitated in line 4, while the people were unsure of how to react initially, we see that they now move forward with enthusiasm. So without waiting, we ran to the open space. "We ran" here conveys their excitement. Okay, line 10 says, "Ululating to the mountains and the pathways," and this is an example of onomatopoeia because it mimics the African vocalization. Traditionally, in African cultures, we hear ululating to express strong emotion. So it's either to express sadness and mourning at a funeral, but it can also be used to express celebration at happy events, which is what we see in this case. So why are the people celebrating? Because they can now run to the open spaces in the mountains and the pathways. And this represents their freedom of movement, something which was taken away from them during apartheid. Line 11 mentions people from all circles of the earth being called together, and this shows diverse people coming together, and it is a reference to South Africa's rainbow nation. Line 12 says, "We shook the old man demanding a festival." In this line, the old man represents the older generation. So this older generation has become cynical and pessimistic due to their suffering, and the youth shows them there's much to be celebrated. In line 13, it says, "We asked for all the first fruits of the season." The fruits here represent growth and abundance, but more than that, they also represent equality. It shows that the best is no longer reserved for an elite minority, and the people of South Africa are demanding the best for themselves. In line 13, we can also see alliteration with first fruits, and this draws attention to the fact that South African people want the best for themselves, and the idea that no one should be deprived any longer. Line 14 goes on to say, "We held hands with a stranger," and holding hands is a sign of friendship and of reconciliation, something very important in the new South Africa. To become friends with a stranger shows unification and suggests that people will put their differences aside. "We shouted across the waterfalls." So here shouting shows the enthusiasm of the South African people. Waterfalls are extremely loud, so this shows how their enthusiasm competes with nature's own music. "People came from all lands," once again highlighting unification of diverse groups. And it was the first day of peace. The first day suggests a new beginning, and the word peace contrasts with the title that mentions war, and this emphasizes an end to the war, an end to violence, an end to human atrocities. The last line of the poem says, "We saw our ancestors traveling on the horizon," and this is a reference to African traditional belief where ancestors have a connection with the living. So even the people who have passed on still have a role in the lives of those who are on earth. We see alliteration in traveling tall, and this highlights the ancestors have been elevated. It shows a sense of pride and importance as they travel tall on the horizon, and the horizon says they are looking towards the future. It suggests that South Africa has a bright future ahead. The structure of this poem is quite important. We see that it's all in one stanza. The poem uses free verse and there's no set rhyme scheme, and this supports the idea of breaking free of rules, of breaking free of anything that can confine you. We also see the use of enjambment in this poem. There's a continuation of a sentence beyond a line, and this supports the African oral tradition of storytelling. We see that oral tradition tells stories about important events, such as the end of apartheid in South Africa's case. The oral tradition also makes use of dialogue, and we see that used in this poem. Ultimately, this poem is structured like a story. It starts off slowly, there's a rising action and a resolution with a final message. If we look at the imagery, we see celebration, we see renewal, we see a new beginning. There is mention of nature and connection of the African people to their land. The themes here are apartheid, triumph over oppression, and unity coming together as one rainbow nation. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe, hit like, share it, and follow me on Instagram and Facebook.